Hi, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in a game called Flick of Faith. Normally I'd show you some pictures here, but I only took one photo when I played this past weekend, and it wasn't a great photo. So I'll just talk about the game. You can look up pictures on Board Game Geek if you are interested. And really, at its core, the game is a dexterity flicking game where you have these little tokens that you are trying to flick onto one of 4 islands or a center island in the middle of a square neoprene mat. And you're flicking from the edge of that mat. There's kind of a cloud cover around the edge of the mat, and you can flick from anywhere within that cloud cover. The game does a couple interesting things, I think, because the core game would be simple and fun by itself. You're flicking some tokens, trying to get them onto islands. That's fun. However, or at least that's fun for some people, I think. However, the game adds some extra layers to it without going too far with those layers. And I think my favorite of those layers is that at the beginning of each round of flicking, each player has a set number of tokens that they're going to flick during that round. At the beginning of each round, the current start player is given 2 random voting cards. And they're going to look at those voting cards, and those cards have a rule on them that will either apply to that round or for the rest of the game. And they will choose one of those cards to put face up on the table and one to put face down, and then they call for a vote between those 2 cards. I think this is a really interesting mechanism because what they're doing is they're saying, okay, full transparency, here's one possible rule that will, if voted upon, will be the rule for this round or for the rest of the game. That's the one that's face up. But there's also one that's face down, and that one they can they can tell the truth. They can say exactly what that card is. They can give the gist of it, or they can lie about it. Maybe that's a really good rule, or a really punishing rule, maybe a really silly rule, and they know it's not a very silly group, but they want that rule to get into play. So they can bluff a little bit about that face down rule, and then they call for a vote, and all players vote thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up for the face up rule, thumbs down for the face down rule. In my one play, we played 4 players. Most of the time the face up rule was the one that was voted on, just because we knew what it was. But even then, you have a choice as the first player as to which rule goes face up and has that full transparency and which one goes face down. So you might really want, once you know that the group seems to be voting more for the face up rules, you might just put the one that you want face up to have everyone vote upon it. Really, I mean, it's a really clever voting system, a really interesting voting system that I wonder if it appears in other games that I'm not aware of, but I'd love to see this type of voting system in other games. But it adds a fun little twist to a game that is otherwise just a simple dexterity game. There's also Asymmetric Powers. I like the Asymmetric Powers. And there are also different targets that you're aiming for. Even though there are 4 islands and one little center island, a tiny center island, there's a couple different rules around those islands. Like on each island, there is a smaller circle where if you end up flicking touching or inside that smaller circle, you get to place I think a village or a city token, a big token there that's hard to move around, hard to move off that circle once you place it, and it's permanent. It's there for the rest of the game, whereas all the little tokens are pulled off the board each round. So that you have these smaller targets within the islands. Also, I thought this is a clever little rule. At the end of each round, you score not for each token that you have on an island, but rather for each island where you have at least 1 token. So this is the game saying, don't just target the island that's closest to you, go after a variety of islands, and yet at the same time, if you do have the majority of tokens on any single island, you get some extra points for that too. So the game is encouraging diversity, go after a bunch of different islands, but also maybe find one island to focus on and try to get the majority on that island. So not a complex game, but it adds enough layers without going too far to a dexterity game to make me want to play again. If someone wanted to pull this out of the game night again, I would gladly play Flick of Faith again. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you know of another game that uses a voting system like the one that I described, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Or if you can think of another dexterity game that adds just enough complexity, just enough layers of gamification without going too far in that, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that as well. Thanks.